Hello, hi, hi, hi. Oh, hi, there you are. Welcome to Eyewear. I was just looking down, I was just thinking, I was being pensive. I want to review the recent film called Thor. Now, unlike most people, I have a friend called Thor uh, who lives in Montreal. But for most people, Thor is an ancient Norse god, and also, of course, a comic book from the Marvel comic books universe. And we're all familiar with Thor's hammer, and that's about it. Also, that he has a duplicitous half-brother Loki, and his father is the one-eyed Odin, and he has some friends and allies and enemies, and in the comic book, he is dressed in a rather Nordic mythological way, and I can't remember anything else with the comic book. It was one of my least favorite of the Marvel comic books. I love Spider-Man, the Fantastic Four, um, and Hulk, and Doctor Strange, and maybe a few others, but Thor was not one of my favorites. That being said, I was drawn to the film for several reasons. The most famous thing about this movie, of course, is that it's directed by none other than Kenneth Branagh. Or is that Branagh? I think it's Branagh. Anyway, Kenneth Branagh, as you may recall, rose to fame as a latter-day Orson Welles. When he, or perhaps one could say a kind of new Laurence Olivier. When his first film, when he was a young man, Henry V, made him a household name, and he was nominated for Academy Awards, and so on, for this extraordinary film with its great patriotic speech about St. Crispin's Day. And it was also famous for its brutal and realistic battle scenes. Since then, Kenneth Branagh has made some hits and misses, mostly misses, a few quasi-okay Shakespeare films, and a few other duds. So there was a lot of hullabaloo about the fact that here he was directing a Hollywood blockbuster. But it makes sense, because Thor has a kind of Shakespearean grandeur to it, and certainly the way Branagh directs it, it has some pretty impressive battle scenes. And it has a kind of, well, as I've said, it has a Shakespearean subtext to it, probably just the way it's been written. But anyway, the movie also stars everyone's favorite schlock actor of the moment, really, Anthony Hopkins. He was great in the 90s with Shadowlands and Remains of the Day, and several other films at that time, like Howard's End. There was a period in the early 90s, I think it was around 1993, when he was being nominated just for left, right, and center for Academy Awards for his serious roles. And of course, this was on the back of his win, and I think it was 1990 or 1991, for Hannibal Lecter, one of the great cinema villains of all time, probably second only to Dracula. But anyway, here we are, and he's an older man, and he's playing Odin. And isn't that great? And Natalie Portman's in it as well. And Stellan Skarsgård, who, as far as I can tell, I haven't done any research about this whatsoever, but I think he is Norse, or Icelandic, or Swedish, but certainly he comes from a Nordic clime, more or less. Or certainly he plays that role in the film. Is the film any good? Well, the character of Thor... Oh, I forgot to mention that Idris Elba is in it. The wonderful Idris Elba from The Wire and latterly Luther. So there's some great supporting actors in this film. And even Jeremy Renner has a surprise appearance. The main actor, who I'd never heard of before, is kind of a stud muffin kind of figure. He's a very buff, blonde, very likable guy, kind of like a bigger, more handsome and gregarious Brad Pitt, actually. He's a lovely chap, and he plays the role very, very well, and I wish him well. Is the film any good? Well, yes and no. It's very touching at the end. It's got a fantastic last few minutes. There are some spectacular, although a little bit too CGI-heavy special effects. Idris Elba is wonderful. Anthony Hopkins is exactly as you would expect him to be, nothing more, nothing less. Natalie Portman really has nothing to do in the film. She's one of these scientists slash babes that they have in a lot of Hollywood movies, where she's really more of a babe, someone to fall in love with, rather than really be. I mean, as a scientist, she provokes very little in the way of action and certainly solves no dilemmas. There's Stellan Skarsgård steals the show in a bar in the aftermath, where he says that one of the sweetest things I've ever heard in a film. He says he comes home, they've been in a bar fight and he's drunk and Thor has thrown him over his shoulder and he says, "I don't think you are Thor, but you should be." And I think that's something like that. I'm paraphrasing. I think it's lovely. All in all, eyewear would give this out of 5 specs, would give this 3.5 specs, verging on 4, because it was very entertaining and rather sweet and charming and surprisingly entertaining. Anyway, Kenneth Branagh has not done his career any harm or any damage with this film. I'm not going to say I thoroughly enjoyed it, as some of the movie posters in London are saying. I'm not going to go with any puns here. It's worth seeing. Anyway, this is Eyewear signing out. I hope you enjoyed this movie review.